Hello and welcome to episode 40 of the Talk Witchcraft podcast. This episode is all about communication, and Maggie and I will be discussing how communication changes.
You're listening to Talk Witchcraft. On this podcast, we talk about witchcraft as a lifestyle and discover how to merge magic into your daily life.
Every week, we'll demystify witchy topics like tarot, astrology, crystals, herbs, and more as you develop your personal brand of magic and create the life of your dreams. We're your hosts, the Mystic Sisters, Erica
and Maggie. In this segment of the show, we choose a tarot card for the week, and we look for moments that relate to this card in our daily lives. So we chose the Four of Swords this week, and the theme of this card is resting your mind.
This card really is about doing the thing that's going to give your mind the rest it needs. It could be through prayer or meditation. It could be by sleeping until you wake up naturally without an alarm, which I did this morning. It could be about reading a book until you are lost in it without pulling yourself to check your phone or talk to a non-fictional person. It could be about sitting quietly and observing nature.
It could also be about apologizing to someone and making amends for a wrong that you might have done to them. Alternatively, it could be about forgiving someone and not letting that take up space in your mind anymore, regardless of if they've asked for your forgiveness or have done anything to make amends. Those are also ways to ease your mind. So, Erica, do you have a story that relates to the Four of Swords?
I just think about all of those like seasonal checklists or things to do in October, or how to take care of yourself during the holiday season. And it's all things like, so the one that I was looking at for the fall season was things like drink hot chocolate, or eat a caramel apple, or sit outside and listen to the silence. And it's all these things about enjoying the moment and enjoying what's happening in nature and enjoying the season that we're in and taking part in all of those traditional aspects of those seasons. And so that's kind of what the Four of Swords is about, is seeing what is important in that moment and letting your mind be completely absorbed in it and taking part in it.
I like that. I wish they should do that for every season. It seems like I mostly see them in the fall.
I have one for every season.
Oh.
I have a bingo card that I made for myself. So it's like I do the things in the season and then I get bingo when I've,
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
We should put that in Mumbles Academy if you want to share it.
Sure.
So Dana and I recently built a breakfast nook in our kitchen. There's like this kind of weird space in the kitchen, and so we built a bench in there, and we put in a table, and now I sit and eat my breakfast there. And for the last couple of months since we built it, I was sitting there, I'd eat my breakfast, and I'd also play this game on my iPad where you like make a picture out of pixels based on the clues that they give with like numbers. I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, it makes pretty...
I play those games too.
They're fun. It's like a nice relaxing thing to do.
Yeah.
But I think it was 2 days ago. Maybe it was yesterday. It was today also. Anyway, I've been doing it for a couple days now. That I didn't get my iPad out and I was just eating my breakfast. And it was because the cats finally decided that they're no longer afraid of the breakfast nook and they'll come sit with us there. And so I was like, I'm just going to spend time with the cats and eat my breakfast. And we were looking outside and we saw the squirrels and the birds. And, we have an oak tree in the front. So the squirrels will take the acorns and they'll bury them. And then they'll unbury them because they're trying to break down the outside husk so that it's like easier to eat it for the squirrels. But if it wasn't broken down enough, they would rebury it. And then the birds, the blue jays specifically, would come after and eat the ones that they reburied because the squirrels had revealed the hiding spots, and the birds with their strong beaks could break into the acorns and eat
those sneaky birds.
I know, they're so sneaky. And I'm sure that they've been doing this for a while, and I just hadn't noticed it because I was, wrapped up in this game on my iPad. There's nothing wrong with, playing a game on your iPad or on your phone or whatever. But just I was recognizing like, oh, there's this whole other world outside, and if I just take a rest from like thinking and like looking at this logic puzzle and look outside, there's like all this stuff going on, and it was really fun. And Luna was doing that like clicky thing that cats do when they want to attack something. And so I just kept telling her, no, Luna, birds are friends. You're an indoor cat. You just look at them. Yeah, it was really nice though, and it made me think of this Four of Swords, you know, resting my mind, and instead just like being present in the moment and being relaxed and rested.
So it's just nice to, with you saying like you were doing a logic problem, you were actively using your mind, and just, you know, that Four of Swords reminds us that we don't have to be using our mind all the time, and we can just be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So now we'll move on to our discussion about communication. We thought we'd look at a variety of ways we communicate and the different recipients of our communication as well. And I just want to interject, as a speech language pathologist, this is something that we actually measure for in young children, is if they change the way they speak depending on the audience. And like, so do they talk differently to their peers versus their parents versus other adults versus strangers? And so we talk differently to different recipients. So let's start with communicating with other people.
So one thing that we were thinking was important when it comes to communicating with other people is the difference between listening, really listening, and just hearing somebody. And we talked about this a little bit in the 5 Ways to Make the Most of Libra Season episode a couple weeks ago. I think Erica mentioned that instead of just waiting until it's your turn to talk again, which is more like hearing, you're just hearing that they are making sounds and you're waiting until it's your turn to make sounds, being really engaged in the conversation where you're listening to what they're saying, whether it's like an argument or a debate or something like that, or somebody is sharing a hardship that they're going through or a joy that they want to share with you. If you're listening, you're able to respond to that emotion that they're presenting you with, rather than just waiting until it's your turn to say something.
Yeah, and, you know, we've talked about that piece of putting that some people don't appreciate when others put in their own stories in the middle of their story, which for some people is a way of showing, I listened to you and this is how I relate to you. And so it's always about balancing that piece and really understanding your communication partner, and knowing what they are needing from that particular conversation event. If they're wanting somebody just to listen to them, or if they're wanting to have this back and forth conversation.
Yeah, that makes me think of that episode of Parks and Rec where Anne's pregnant and she keeps having these like complaints, and all she wants is to just be like upset about these things she's going through. And Chris keeps trying to fix it, and he's like, well, here, we can get you a massage. Here, this will help with your indigestion. And he just keeps trying to solve the problem. But what she wants is just to vent, basically. Mm-hmm. And so someone might want support and solutions. But in that particular instance, this character didn't want that. She just wanted to have an ear to listen to her and understand what she was going through. So I think that's like something you might have to, sometimes you have to ask, like, what do you want out of this conversation? Do you want my advice? Do you want my support? Do you want just a shoulder to cry on? What is this? What can I help you with here?
Yeah, one thing that I really appreciate about both Miles and Kim, they are very good at communication, which is something I've not been good at in terms of relating my own needs. So whenever we're having a venting session or a complaint or something like that, one or both of them will always ask, like, are you looking for solutions or just a vent? And it's not something that we really think about asking that question. And I think it's a really important one to ask.
Yeah, and sometimes when you go into a conversation with someone, you don't necessarily know what you need. But when someone presents that question to you, you can like, okay, I guess what I need right now is just for you to listen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or I guess what I need from you right now is your advice or whatever it is that you need in that moment. But when you're in that like feeling space of like needing something, you might not really know what it is that you need. So having somebody around you who can like ask that question and help you understand.
Yeah. And I know that for me, sometimes if I'm not getting what I need and I am able to recognize what I need, I'll say like, I just need you to tell me that it's okay and that I'm valid and that my feelings are real feelings. Like, I just need you to say those words to me. And then my conversation partner will be like, it's okay. You are valid. Your feelings are real. And like, so giving them that script, even, it can be enough to have that need be met.
Yeah, exactly. And like also being that person for other people, being the person who does ask that question.
Yeah.
And we also wanted to talk about the difference between empathy and sympathy. Erica and I have talked about this a lot in the past, and so we just wanted to bring it up on the podcast, which goes along with the listening versus hearing. Because when you're empathetic, you're right there with the person, and you're relating to them. And so it's like what Erica was saying with the bringing up an example of when you also went through something. And not getting upset about that. So that using an example of a time when you also felt the same that the person you're talking to is discussing is a way of showing your empathy, because you have felt the same way as them in the past and you can understand that emotion or that place that they're in. Where sympathy is where you're kind of looking down into the hole at the person who's in that hard place, and not really down in the hole with them.
And what Maggie is referring to is a video by Brené Brown where she talks about empathy, and you can Google it. It's a fantastic video where she lays out the difference between sympathy and empathy, and about instead of being on the ladder saying, I sympathize with you, it's coming down off of the ladder and being with the person in that hole and saying, I empathize with you. Sympathy, for me, involves a lot of judgment, and it involves understanding from your own perspective, whereas empathy has no judgment and involves putting yourself into other people's shoes and understanding why they have those feelings and what is going on.
Yeah, and it really does involve like very closely listening to how they are expressing themselves. And that sort of brings us to the final thing we wanted to talk about with the communicating with others, which is this idea of saying I'm sorry. I think our culture has kind of come to this point where if you say you're sorry, it's fixed and you don't have to do anything about it anymore. You fixed it. And something Erica said to me recently was that she's been noticing that when people apologize to her, it's like they're shutting down the conversation and they don't want to do any more talking about it. It's too much confrontation. And so if I say I'm sorry, we don't have to talk about this anymore.
Yeah.
Is that right, Erica?
Yeah, I've noted like sorry is just the word that's like, okay, I'm sorry for what I did. Let's be done. I don't want to do this anymore. And I've really actually come to hate the word I'm sorry, the words I'm sorry, because sorry is just the start of this active process of apologizing. I saw a sign a while back that had the 5 elements of apologizing, which really like spoke to me. And the first act is expressing your regret. So that's where you say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for blank. But then you have to go further to accepting responsibility, which is to say, it was wrong of me to do the action. Then you have to make restitution. So it's asking the question or stating, what can I do to help you start trusting me again? And then a genuine promise of change. So I'm committed to doing everything I can so that you can trust me again. And then requesting forgiveness, so that, will you please forgive me? And also remembering that forgiveness does not have to be given. You can ask for somebody to forgive you, but they don't have to, or they might not be ready to.
Even if you've gone through all of those stages, it could take them longer, more time, more actions on your part, or it might never come about. Recently, the former youth pastor at our parents' church shared something on Facebook that I think really illustrates this point. I can't find the post right now, but basically what it was two students. One had said something mean to the other student and then immediately realized that it was the wrong thing to say and apologized. And the other student got up and went and got one of those plastic cups, the clear ones, and crumpled it up and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, cup." And the other kid was like, "What?" And she said, "Well, see, I didn't fix the cup by saying I'm sorry to it. It's not fixed. And it's because you need to do all those other steps to make the cup whole again, basically, or the person that you've wronged whole again."
And yeah, it's, using that cup analogy of like that, making restitution and genuinely promising change, that's going through and diligently ironing out all of those little crinkles and all the little breaks. And in the cup, if you poke a hole in it, it's going to take a lot of work to fix that hole, and that cup is not going to hold that water any longer as well as it used to. So when you hurt somebody and are apologizing, you have to remember that like those little crinkles and those little holes are still there, and depending on how big the hole is, it might take a while before that forgiveness is given.
Exactly. So before we talk about the other types of communication in this episode, we're going to take a break to talk about our herb of the week. And this episode is brought to you by thyme. So Erica is going to start, as usual, by talking about the medicinal properties, and then I will share the magical properties.
I love plants. I say about these plants like every single time like they're the best one, because every single time they are the best one. Because thyme is also the best plant. And there's so many different varieties. There's so many different flavors and smells and things that you can get from thyme. It's got a really lovely citrusy smell to it. You can get the lemon thyme, which mosquitoes hate, by the way. So, plant some lemon thyme and then all over your grass and just like walk through it, and the mosquitoes will never come to your house. I can't say never. I can't promise that. Sorry.
Got to use protective language.
Right. They might come to your house, but it will definitely help keep them away. Medicinally, thyme is full of essential and volatile oils. That's part of what makes it so pungent in its smell. And because of this, like our friend the eucalyptus plant, it really helps with coughs as an antispasmodic and expectorant, and just general cold and wellness helpfulness. The volatile oils that are in thyme contain phenol, thymol, and carvacrol. I think I'm saying that right, which are all antiseptics, and then the latter two are both antibacterial and antifungal. So they are really, really powerful immune plants. You can use an infusion of thyme to bathe infected wounds, to clean them, to promote healing. You could also put it in a bath for some aromatherapy if you're feeling particularly congested. It helps to boost the mind, spirit, and body, and relieves exhaustion, headaches, and depression, as well as upper respiratory complaints, and help with skin and scalp irritations. So thyme is seen a lot in lotions and shampoos. You'll also see it a lot in commercial toothpastes and mouthwash because of those wonderful essential oils and volatile oils. And they're really good for aiding in toothache. Also very important as a culinary herb. We use thyme in nearly everything for sauces, and I know that thyme is one of the primary spices in like pot pies and like marinara sauces. It goes great with rosemary on breads and stuff like that. So great for your kitchen witchery as well. Oh, it's in herbs de Provence. I forgot that. It's one of the major spices in herbs de Provence. So
it's also a major herb in the gravy used for breakfast gravy, biscuits and gravy.
Yep.
So thyme is a passive herb. It corresponds with the planets Venus and Mars and the elements water and earth. And it is also associated with the zodiac signs Aries and Libra. The main uses magically are for health and healing, sleep and psychic powers, for love and attraction, and purification, as well as courage and energy boosts. So you can wear thyme in your hair or in like a charm bag around your neck or in your pocket, and that can be used for any of those magical uses I listed, but most particularly when it comes to attracting somebody to you for friendship or for love. So loyalty and affection, and creating a good opinion of yourself in the eyes of another person. And I think that's partly because it smells so good, so people are going to be attracted to you for that reason. But if you smell it, it can also give you a boost in your courage and your confidence, as well as your energy level. The Greeks often used thyme when they burned, ancient Greeks, I should say, in their temples to purify the temple, and particularly before a magical ritual and to cleanse the area. So we can still use it in that way, adding it to your cleansing herb bundle, burning it in your home for banishing things you don't want in your home, for purifying your home, and to attract health for yourself and the people who live there and any guests that you might have. And if you add marjoram, which we've talked about on the podcast before, with the thyme and make a bath infusion, that's a really good way to cleanse yourself of sorrows and grief. If you use thyme in a pillow and sleep with it under your pillow, or make it into a dream pillow, it can prevent nightmares from coming into your sleep, and it can help to ensure that you have a restful sleep. It also can bring about psychic dreams and premonition dreams, and it can enhance psychic powers and your ability to listen to your intuition. And it's even thought to help you to be able to see fairies or to see evidence of fairies if you wear thyme or plant thyme in your home. It attracts fairies. Like Erica said, you can plant it around your home and it'll take away the mosquitoes and things like that, but it'll invite fairies into your yard and make your yard a magical place for them to live. The main topic, again, is communication, and the next type of communication we wanted to talk about on the podcast is how to communicate with yourself. And in a previous episode, we talked about negative self-talk and how that can impact you in the episode where we talked about perfectionism. So we're going to focus more on communicating yourself in an effort to reveal your emotions, your thought process, your motivations, and generally just getting to know yourself on a deeper level, which can be done in 3 ways: with your thoughts, monitoring your thoughts, speaking out loud to yourself, and writing things down. So we'll start with thought monitoring. What is thought monitoring?
Thought monitoring is just what it sounds like, being aware of your thoughts, including dreams and daydreams. We think pretty much all the time, so it's hard to be aware of every thought you have. The most important time to tune into your thoughts is when you're feeling strong emotions, whether they are pleasant emotions or painful.
Yes, emotions are signals to you, and they can be very revealing about what's going on in your situation. So for me, I have been very disconnected from my emotions in the past, and over the last year, particularly since the beginning of this pandemic, so I guess 2 years, I have been much more intentional about learning what emotions feel like in my body and what they're called. So naming the emotions. I knew what the names of emotions are, but I didn't necessarily understand how they felt to me. And it started for me, the most obvious emotions were the ones that felt negative or bad in my body. And so those were things like when I felt overwhelmed or angry or sad. And those were easier for me to notice because they negatively impacted me. They made me not be able to work effectively. I had to take a step out of my work process in order to because they were there. They weren't letting me do what I wanted to do. So I learned to manage and release those emotions instead of suppressing them. Lately, though, I've been able to sense and understand the more pleasant feeling emotions like joy and love and excitement while I'm in those moments in a more mindful way. Because in the past, it's kind of been like after the fact, like, oh, that was a really good time. That was really happy. When I felt happy in that moment, or I felt loved in that moment. And I didn't necessarily feel it at the time. So it's been more recently like that moment that I was talking about earlier, where I was able to just like watch the squirrels, and it felt really good. Like I almost cried because I was so happy that I was noticing that feeling in the moment.
Yeah, and I think too, it's important to name our emotions and recognize the differences between them because, overwhelm, anger, and sadness can all feel very similar. And you can know, like, I feel bad, but, and confusing one with the other. And so being able to recognize the difference between overwhelmed and anger and sadness, and why they're different. Because I do feel sad when I'm overwhelmed, but it's a different sort of sadness, if that makes sense.
Definitely it does. Like yesterday, I had a really frustrating moment where things were just like going really slow. Like the internet went down, and then our circuit trips every once in a while. So it seemed like all of these things were happening in this moment that felt really urgent for what I needed to do. It wasn't urgent, but my body was like, this is very bad. And I was able to determine that it was a feeling of overwhelm, and it was sort of expressing itself as anger because I was like yelling at my computer and like stomping around the house. But it was more like overwhelm because it was due to something that was overwhelming me rather than due to something that was really an angering. So that's kind of the thought monitoring aspect of it, where it's like figuring out what triggered that emotion. Mm-hmm. What was the thought or what was the moment that triggered it? And the emotion is the signal to help you figure out what the thought was.
Well, and then at that level too, once you can name this is overwhelm and not anger, you can say, okay, well, what steps do I need to take to de-escalate that overwhelming need versus resolving an anger. Like there's a difference there. You weren't angry at your computer. You weren't angry at the projects you were doing. You were overwhelmed by it. And so how can you fix that particular emotion?
Yeah, exactly. Because there's different ways to fix those emotions. So being able to name them, like you said, is super important.
I also have, with the positive ones, I've been using joy as one of my top values for my life is feeling joy. And the reason for that is because I learned the difference between joy and happiness, and it was a big moment for me. So happiness is something that comes to you externally. It's something that getting a gift, seeing a loved one, those are all external things that bring you happiness. But joy is something that you bring from the inside, that happens for yourself. It's one of those intrinsic motivators. And I think that there is a huge difference between those two, like all those sayings like money doesn't bring happiness. Well, it does. It does bring happiness. It doesn't bring joy, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think we have a scale in Mumbles Academy where you can decide where you are on the emotional value scale. And joy is like the highest, if you can like rank them. And happiness is a little bit lower. I think it's just above the middle, because it's just not that one is better than the other. None of the emotions, the ranking system isn't to like say something is better than another thing. It's just the way that it feels. It makes you feel more pleasant, much more pleasant to feel joy than to feel happiness, versus like anger, which is pretty low on the emotional scale because it feels very, very bad in your body. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. All of them have a purpose to feel them, all these emotions.
Yes. Yep. So we talked about thought monitoring, and then you mentioned speaking out loud. What is speaking out loud?
That's also pretty obvious. It's just what it sounds like. It's when you say something that you are noticing, like you're in your car and you're like, oh, that driver's driving like a lunatic. Or giving yourself some sort of instructions like, okay, before I can put the laundry in the laundry, I have to sort it. Giving yourself some sort of instruction like that. But doing it in an out loud way. So not just thinking it, but saying it. And this is a little bit more intentional than your thoughts, because your thoughts just happen automatically. Like you can't stop them. They just happen. But when you say something out loud, that's more intentional. You have to like actively do it. It might happen without you really thinking about it, but it's still less frequent than your thoughts. Yes. Because most of us don't go around just like talking nonstop.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's exactly what it is. It's when you say a thought out loud, it's almost as if somebody else is saying it to you. And so it's less about being in your head and more about being this external instruction, this external thought. It makes it more real, more tangible, more something that you can actually do. If we think about our, when we were talking, I can't remember what episode it was, but we talked about our gremlins, or what was the name of yours, Maggie?
Laurel.
Laurel. Or Maggie, when you were talking about Laurel, when we say those thoughts in our head, they feel, like they feel real, but then when you say them out loud, it makes them, it's like, oh, that's a silly thought to have. That's not something that's true. So it brings it out of that mind space and into the physical realm.
Yeah. And for me, it's like, it seems like when I say something out loud, it's because I'm trying to talk myself through something that is either really hard for me to do, really a challenging thing. Like for me, doing laundry is like the hardest thing to do. And so if I talk myself through it, then it's like, okay, that external thing that's giving me instructions. So it's either when something is really challenging or when something is really boring. And I think sometimes those are the same things for me, that it's like laundry is so freaking boring that I just don't want to do it. So if I just talk through it, and I was noticing last night, I also really don't like doing the dishes, but I had to do the dishes before I could cook dinner, which is something that's fun for me. So I made up a song about cleaning the dishes, and that made it fun. But I was doing this external speaking out loud thing to make it more fun and to give myself instructions about what I'm doing. Like, now I'm scrubbing the pot because you got to scrub the pots. Like, that's not how it went, but it was actually a pretty good song.
Oh, that's great.
So then the final thing that I mentioned before is writing things down. So what is that? What does that look like, Erica?
This type of communication is even more intentional than speaking out loud or thinking because it is an added step to gather a paper and pencil to write it down. So writing involves making notes, shopping lists, schedules, or keeping a journal or diary.
So I do all of these things. I've had to definitely organize because in the past I had like Post-it notes all around like all of my computer monitors, but they end up blending into the landscape. It's like your stair spoon. It's just like, now I just have rainbow Post-its on my computer and they don't help. So, I've had to come up with new strategies.
Yeah. I love planners. They're one of my like dopamine hits. I have hundreds of them because I have yet to find the perfect one. Maggie's planners are pretty dang close. They're just not quite there for me yet. But they're great. They're wonderful.
What would make it better, just out of curiosity, for you in particular?
I'm not sure. Let me think about that.
I mean, it's like you said, like there's no such thing as a perfect
There's no such thing as the
for everybody.
It's like Maggie's planner is right up there at like 99% effective.
Probably because we are
sisters.
Grew up in the same house and we're sisters.
Yeah. I don't utilize lists as much as I should. I know that to-do lists would help me a lot. I kind of jot down to-do lists in my planner. And then like I also do the paper pencil thing, but I also do the digital thing. So like you can have like 4 different calendars and it's okay.
As long as like somehow they come together, or as long as you get the things done that need to be done, finding a system that works for you. But one thing I did want to talk about was particularly the journaling aspect, or keeping a private diary. And one thing that I really like to do is automatic writing, which is even more intentional, I think, than any of these other things, because you're setting aside like 15 minutes to just write. And that can be really revealing about your emotions and and really getting to know yourself, because basically how you do it is you just start writing and you can't stop writing, whether you're typing or writing with a pencil, and then you keep going. Eventually your conscious mind gets bored and your subconscious mind will start talking. And so it becomes really revealing at that point, because you start opening up more about like what's going on a deeper level. So I think that that's really helpful for me. I try to do that once a day if I remember, but sometimes I don't make time for it.
Yeah, keeping a journal has always been a struggle for me. I am definitely a person that wants to journal, and I have started and failed many, many times, but I keep on trying. I keep on doing it. And I have just like a smattering of journals from when I was very small to now that have like 4 or 5 pages written in it, and then get tossed into a memory box. And it's, I usually write when I'm upset. And so it's hard to go back through those journals because it then triggers that emotion for me again. But I think that that's the way that I process those emotions, is by writing definitely. It all out of my brain.
And I think that that's a really good way to use writing intentionally, to like kind of like a therapy session. So the final type of communication, or the final, I guess, recipient of communication that we wanted to talk about, is the spirit realm. And so that is very broad. Some of the previous discussion kind of comes into play here, because communicating with others could, if you personify an abstract concept into the form of like a goddess or a god, or if you're monotheistic and you talk to God, then that's similar to, talking to another person, or communicating with another person. But the thing that is different here is that when you communicate with spirit, the way that spirit communicates with you isn't always the same for every person. And so it gets a little wibbly wobbly to describe. So we can only talk about our own experiences and a little bit about what we've heard from other people and how they experience the spirit realm in general. So let's just take a step back to express who lives in the spirit realm, because it encompasses so many different beliefs, and it just depends on what you believe in, as I said before. But the way I see it, the spirit realm is encompassing of the 4 elements that we've talked about before, the planets that we talk about as well when it comes to our herb correspondences, the zodiac signs, archetypes, all sorts of archetypes, plant and animal spirits, as well as human spirits, spirit guides and ancestors and angels, deities, if you work with gods and goddesses, and abstract concepts, so things like love and truth and beauty, all these ideas that it's hard to conceptualize into something concrete. Like I said before, if you're monotheistic, then a single God with a capital G, or if you believe in the universe, or you call it the universe, or spirit, or your favorite self, which Erica and I have decided is our new favorite way to talk about what some people talk about as the higher self. So a few ways that you can communicate with the spirit realm, whichever type of spirit realm entity that you prefer to work with, is through worship, prayer, offerings, and creating an altar or a shrine. So we'll talk a little bit about what each of these mean, and then we'll talk about how you might receive a response from that spirit realm entity. The way I see worship is doing some sort of ritual or spell work or something like that in a joyful way. So including like dancing is usually what I do to express joy, is dancing or singing. Other examples are like shouting praises, playing a musical instrument, making art, or anything else that makes you feel joyful and connected with the spirit realm in some way. Is that kind of how you see worship, Erica?
Yeah. It's a way to celebrate and worship.
Yeah, I think celebrate is a good word to use when it comes to worship. It's a celebration. So the next form is prayer, and that is like having a conversation, just like you would with another person. It's speaking, speaking your troubles, speaking your joys, doing that in some way in order to feel comfort or relief or love or something in return.
And it, again, going back to the communication, it can be spoken internally or it can be spoken externally. However,
yes, exactly.
Yeah. So, if you're having an internal conversation, an internal prayer, it's more reflective, more working through your thought, more meditative. I feel like when you've moved to the place of needing to speak it out loud, to speak your prayer out loud, that's when it needs to become more tangible, more, maybe more urgent, more of a, like, I really need to talk to you kind of feeling.
Yeah. So that's where I see it as like more like spell work, where you're incorporating like props basically and saying something over a candle or whatever, versus like what you said before, the thought being more like the meditative phase where you're reflecting. So another way to communicate with the spirit realm is through offerings. So this is like giving a gift. You can offer up anything that you think your spirit realm entity of choice would enjoy. So it could be anything from like a pretty rock to a flower, a dish of honey. If they enjoy alcohol, an alcoholic beverage, if they maybe even some sort of food form like a cookie or something sweet like that. Burning incense is another type of offering. You can offer the smoke to your spirit realm entity of choice, or lighting a candle in their honor. Can you think of any offerings that you like to do in addition, or?
My favorite offering is to give to the fairy folk on Lunasa their honey cake. I like to hide it for them so that they can find it. That's one of my favorite traditions.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I think a common question that comes up with offerings is like, what do you do with the offering, like, afterward?
Right.
Like the honey cake. So the way I see it is that the essence of that offering is what's taken. And then, so the deity or the spirit will take the essence of that honey cake or the essence of the rock that you've given, and then the physical object will still be there. And so you can do what you want with that afterward. So usually I leave something out for like 24 hours. And then my husband and I joke, like, you can't leave it out longer than that because that's how you get ants. So.
So I was actually just going to say, so when I hide the honey cake for the fairies, I just leave it there because I figure some creature will find it and use it for nourishment. And so I do bring on the ants. But it's usually outside.
Yeah. If it's outside, I'll leave it because that's fine. But if it's inside, we already have issues with ants because it's Florida. So we got to get rid of that stuff. And then the third one is the altars or shrines, which we talked about altars in a previous episode, so we won't talk about it too much here. I just want to reiterate the difference between an altar and a shrine, or the way that I see it. So an altar is like the place where you do a magical working. So it's where you might leave an offering or where you might recite a prayer or engage in meditation. Whereas a shrine is something that you kind of keep up as like a display. So you might keep up a shrine of a loved one who has passed away, like pictures of them or things like that, or things that they enjoyed. But you might not change it all that much. You might pray in front of it, but you probably wouldn't do very many magical workings there.
Right. Yeah, you could have a shrine to your deity on your altar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they could be combined.
Or you could have like Maggie has her shrine to her wedding ceremony. You could have a shrine to anything, really, whatever you need to represent your spirit entity. So Maggie was alluding to that the entities of the spirit realm communicate differently than when we communicate with others or with ourselves. And so one way that we can make that more clear is we're talking about asking for signs. So some sort of sign that could come from the spirit realm to help you make a decision, to help you clarify information, make sure that you're understanding the world correctly. That's kind of what we're talking about. And they aren't direct words. They aren't direct in any stretch of the imagination. They're very indirect, and you have to think about it and you have to be looking for it because you never know how it's going to turn up.
Right. And you can ask for a specific type of sign. So you can say specifically, like, if you're there, please give me a sign. Or if I'm going in the right direction, if I'm making the right decision, please send me a sign. If I've gotten your message correct, if I've interpreted the meaning of that sign correctly, send me another sign, or anything like that. And then you can sort of look for those signs that you've asked for. And this can be in the form of like a number. So you can ask, show me the number 7, or show me the number 9, or something like that, and look for phone numbers or license plates or street signs that might have that number in it.
The spirits, they're tricksy. They're tricksy. So the number 7 could come up in you have 7 peas in your dinner. Or they could come up as you were watching a TV show and you got to watch 7 episodes before you were interrupted. Like they're really tricky.
Yeah.
They're not direct.
So number is one example. It could also be like a specific image. So show me a butterfly. And then again, it could be tricky. It could be a real butterfly flying across the window, or it could be a butterfly in a logo, or a butterfly on your computer screen, just like some picture of it that someone else took. So that's another example.
Or you could ask for dream visitations. My dreams are very lucid and they're very quirky. And I get premonitions all the time in my dreams. For example, last night I had a dream about my ex. And who should text me first thing this morning? My ex. So, like, your dreams can be very powerful if that's something that you have and are able to remember. Because some people, they can't. And that's not a reflection on you. It's just not how you get your signs.
So get creative. These are just a few examples of some ways that you can ask for a sign specifically. It could be asking to hear a song. That's another way. Asking for seeing it in a book, seeing a sign in a book, or a gift arriving or anything like that. And the most important thing, I think, when you are asking for a sign as a form of confirmation or communication is to have it be something that would actually stand out to you. So I wouldn't ask to see a black cat if I were asking for a sign, because I have 2 black cats, so I see them pretty much 24/7. And so that would be kind of a weird confirmation, because that's not different from my everyday. But it would be pretty weird to see a polar bear here in Florida, so maybe that would be a more accurate sign.
Right. And don't ask for a sign and a gift when your birthday's coming up or Christmas is just around the corner.
Yeah, your gift for your holidays.
They are things that could happen, but are not common for you.
Yeah. And I also think it's important to not get carried away with looking for these signs. I think some people, I see all the time in like Facebook groups and on the witchcraft Reddit, that subreddit, that it's like, what does this mean? Like, my necklace ended up on the floor. Like, it was on the shelf and then it was on the floor. And it's like, it doesn't mean anything. It just fell.
It fell, yeah.
It fell off your shelf. I mean, it could mean something, but I think some people do get carried away with it. And sometimes things don't mean anything.
Yeah.
And you don't want to kind of get wrapped up in that rabbit hole of everything is a sign or everything has some sort of deeper meaning.
Yeah. Some things just are.
Yes.
Just as a final thought, I am reminded of the joke of the man who is in the flood and he asks for God to send him a sign that he'll be okay, and a rowboat comes and he says, no, I'm waiting, my God will take care of me. And then helicopter comes and he's like, no, I'm okay, my God will take care of me. And then something else comes. There's always 3, but I can't remember. And then he ends up dying because the flood got too high and he drowned. And he gets to heaven and God is like, what the heck are you doing here? I sent you a canoe and I sent you a helicopter and I sent you the 3rd thing that I can't remember. Like, those were all signs, and they were mundane things, and they weren't divine inspiration things, but they were still God's sign to this man that he should be saved.
Exactly. Yeah. So like not going too deep into like everything has meaning, but also not like forgetting that mundane things can be signs themselves. During Libra season, we have decided to share issues that are meaningful and impactful, and this week we hope you will join us in advocating with United We Dream for a pathway to citizenship for DACA recipients.
DACA recipients and allies should use the time to remind the Biden administration that DACA is not enough, and we need to deliver citizenship for millions this year.
So in the show notes, you will find some instructions for if this is an important issue to you as well. You can contact the Biden administration to change or to make sure that the program, the DACA program has a pathway to citizenship for the hundreds of thousands of DACA recipients. And there's a place to submit a public comment to let lawmakers know why you support a pathway to citizenship, and for any aspiring American.
And then there will also be a link to the United We Dream website where you can donate if you choose to. We felt like this was a good one to go in our communication episode because this pathway to citizenship allows millions of people the ability to have a voice in democracy, to be able to participate, to share and communicate, and to be heard.
Interestingly, as we are recording this podcast, Mercury is retrograde. At the same time, Mercury, or Hermes, is a great spirit realm entity to communicate with on behalf of travelers and immigrants and people who are on the move. And so leaving an offering for this deity can be beneficial to protect DACA recipients who are moving along the pathway toward citizenship, and in addition, any immigrants who are looking to become citizens as well.
We are celebrating goddesses this season of our podcast. For each goddess, we will give you a theme to think about that she represents for you to create any sort of ritual or spell or manifestation, or just some way to bring her theme into your life. So I am using my Legendary Ladies Goddess deck that was created by Anne Shen, and today we pulled Bast. We love Bast.
Love Bast.
Bast is her theme for the week is pleasure. And so her little write-up says, you may be in need of some serious self-care, and the goddess Bast is with you. As the ruler of sex, magic, and pleasure, she helps you see and reignite all those aspects in your life. Time to indulge. So, Maggie, how will you invite pleasure to show itself this week?
This is making me want to focus more on self-care this week, particularly like pampering style of self-care. So I'm just gonna do the things I want to do whenever follow my whims. I have a new nail set coming, and so I'm gonna change my nails because I used those gel cured nails, and oh my gosh, last night one of them I like got it caught on my drawer. The drawer doesn't open very easily, so I got it caught and it like snapped and cracked, and it was the biggest pain, like physical pain that I'd felt in a long time. But I'm excited because we'll get to do a new set. I was kind of having to like stretch and cut a previous set in order to fit, because like when you get down to the end, they don't fit quite right. So so I'm gonna have a brand new set, and I'm excited about that.
Nice. I'm going to get a haircut this afternoon, which is before we release the podcast, but still that's something that I really enjoy and is one of my self-care things. And then this weekend we're gonna go tailgate because it's homecoming weekend, and it's early kickoff, so we're gonna start at like 10:30. So we're gonna do pancakes and mimosas at the tailgate instead of the traditional hot dogs and
That's fun.
hamburgers and beers. So I think that'll be fun and pleasurable and a little silly.
And we would love to hear from you as well. You can go to witchwanderer.com to answer this question: how will you invite pleasure to show itself this week? And over the next week, we are also going to be looking for the King of Cups, which will be our tarot card for the next week's episode. This card is about stability, wisdom, diplomacy, generosity, and support. So the King of Cups is very emotionally secure. He is aware of human nature in general. He's a very wise person. He's willing to accept his own limitations and keep his head when a crisis emerges. He is usually able to act with controlled emotion rather than like instinctive or reactive. The King of Cups will evaluate the situation before taking action and is able to create a balanced atmosphere. So we'll be seeing when we felt like we were a King of Cups, or we know somebody who is a King of Cups. If you would like to talk about your experience with the King of Cups listener, then you can send us a voicemail at welisten@talkwitchcraft.com.
You can find out more about this episode by going to mumblesandthings.com/blog/040. Join us next week when we talk about the 5 ways to make the most of Scorpio season.
Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast so that you are notified when we release a new episode. And if you want to help other witches find this show as well, leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts.
You can also find us on Instagram at Mumbles and Things, and join us in the Mumbles Academy to chat about this episode with other witchy folk.
Goodbye!
Goodbye!